Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inside the Newsroom. I'm Summer Roddershot. On Inside the Newsroom, we bring you the trending stories of the KELOLAND area, and we bring in our newsroom staff members to talk about these stories. So you get a unique perspective to the stories you see every day on KELOLAND News and KELOLAND.com. Now, I hope everybody had a great weekend. I know that I did, but especially for all the school-age kids who have to head back to school soon. I know I'm very glad that I'm done with school, but I definitely have some friends that are going back to school, unfortunately for you guys. But, you know, if you need help affording some of the supplies before you go back to school, Project SOS can help you out. The organization has been giving backpacks filled with school supplies to kids for 35 years. However, the banquet is still looking for more school supplies for this year.
We are still always looking for school supplies. We've got the 2 more giveaways after today, and so we could use a few more supplies. Scissors, glue, and composition books are kind of on our need list right now.
Now, the next backpack giveaway is coming up tomorrow. The banquet just asked that you register on their website beforehand and make sure to bring in your child. And genuinely, what better way to kick off the school year with your own kids than by helping other kids, maybe giving back if you can. Obviously, it's just excited that the school year's starting up and got to make sure you get those supplies in. Now, we've got a full show for you today. We're going to be talking about a nonprofit that was able to expand, and we'll see how the expansion is serving the people that it serves. And then after 4 newspapers closed last week, we actually talked to one that is thriving. But coming up next, a data center that's trying to move to Sioux Falls and what it could mean for the cities near it. That's ahead on Inside the Newsroom. Welcome back to Inside the Newsroom. The land is not in the city of Sioux Falls city limits, but the council took action this week for a possible data center west of Veterans Parkway and south of Rice Street. The land is in the city's comprehensive plan. The council changed that plan to allow for a light industry like the data center proposed by Gemini of South Dakota. This is only one step in the process. The city would need to annex the land and change the zoning. Now here to explain what all of that means is Ray Yost. Ray, I had to talk to a couple people about this morning to fully comprehend, and I'm sure I don't even fully comprehend it, but will you break down exactly what is happening with Gemini and this whole data center?
Sure. So if you go back to, where you saw it on the map, it was in the just outside of the city limits in the northeast side. So that's, basically to the east of Veterans Parkway, North Veterans Parkway, and south of Rice Street. So it's outside the city limits, but the city's comprehensive plan thinks that land will eventually be part of Sioux Falls. So it's looking at this data center to say, okay, if this is going to be part of Sioux Falls, then what do we need to do as a city to make this land or allow this data center to be built? So the first step is to change the comprehensive plan. Right now, it's looking like it could have been residential. And they're saying, hey, if it's going to be a data center, we need to make it light industrial. But that's only the first step. So where you get caught up in the next steps is the rezoning and the annexation. So they actually have to bring it into the city of Sioux Falls. And that's a step that's a multi-step process to bring it into the city of Sioux Falls. That's annexation. And then once it would become part of the city of Sioux Falls, then they have to change the zoning. And I'm going to correct myself a little bit. It's not necessarily earmarked right now for residential, but it's zoned agriculture. So that means that it could be up for, any type of use. Sure. But a data center, which houses all that online information, would need to be light industry. And it's not, manufacturing. It's not agriculture. So I hope that explains it a little better. It's a really multiple steps to bring it into the city and then to change things to allow that type of use within that part of the city.
I'm really glad I have people like you to break this down for me, Ray, because that sounds complicated. Yeah. And obviously it is a little bit of a complicated process, which is why they're going through it. Take a little bit of a step back. What is the Gemini data center, or who are they, and what exactly would this bring to the area?
Yeah, we don't know a whole lot yet, which isn't unusual sometimes with different proposed projects. They're licensed and registered in South Dakota, but it looks like one of the investors or owners is in a Los Angeles address. Now we've got people interested in data centers in the state. So Gemini would be looking at housing one on about 140, 160 some acres out there. So it would be a really large one that maybe we don't even know that exists. The general public may not know exists around Sioux Falls that are much smaller. Don't know the exact number of employees. A Brandon official was quoted as saying their understanding is could be 200 to 300 employees. But both communities, Sioux Falls, we talked about the process Sioux Falls is looking at. Brandon is interested because Brandon is going to grow, maybe residentially, keep growing toward the west, toward Sioux Falls. So they're very curious about this too. So right now, Gemini's proposing a fairly large facility, it looks like, in that corner, which could eventually become the city of Sioux Falls, and possibly a few hundred jobs. It's not known yet. I want to make sure people know that. And it's just another economic investment in the state.
Yeah. And you sort of mentioned, the Brandon aspect of it and how it's not only going to affect just Sioux Falls, but also Brandon. And you said, obviously it's going to bring jobs, but it's also where Brandon's looking to move residentially, potentially. Mm-hmm. How could this affect residents from both towns and maybe especially Brandon?
Yeah, Brandon's super interested because their comprehensive plan, if you think of, I don't want to complicate this any further with where the border is, but people who might be familiar, 6 Mile Road, that might ring some bells. But Brandon is looking at the possibility that their residential area and their city limits would grow more toward 6 Mile Road, toward this possible facility. So Brandon's concerned about traffic. How much traffic will this create? Noise is often mentioned with data centers. Sometimes that maybe gets a little confused with another type of center that's more crypto mining. But they're concerned about noise, just the overall compatibility with possible residential growth toward, the possible residential growth from Brandon toward the west.
Sure. And obviously, this is just the beginning of this whole story.
Yeah.
And you're going to work on this further. Tell me a little bit about what you're working on.
Well, I have an interview scheduled with a representative of an organization that's representing Gemini, which isn't unusual either. A lot of times in these processes of either buying or purchasing land or rezoning or construction projects, there will be a local representative. So we've tentatively got something scheduled for noon today where I'm going to ask a little more, can you tell us maybe about how many jobs could be provided there? If this is built, I know you've met with Brandon. How can you address some of their possible concerns with buffers of trees or something like that? And just a little more details. Again, this is a long process, like you said. It feels like sometimes it can happen pretty quickly. But council only took one step, and that was to change the comprehensive plan to allow for light industry. And that's just one piece of this whole puzzle.
Amazing. Ray, is there anything else you think people should know about this story before we move forward?
I think just that we're going to continue to follow it, whether it's my story or someone else's as it continues to through the process, we'll be following it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ray.
Thank you.
Well, after the break, a local organization has moved to a location that is 10 times larger than its previous building. That's coming up on Inside the Newsroom. Welcome back to Inside the Newsroom. From wheelchairs to hospital beds, there's a program in Sioux Falls that provides free medical equipment to people. Now, Owens Outfitters is open in a different location that's more than 10 times bigger than its previous spot. KELOLAND's Kelly Volk takes us inside.
This medical equipment lending library was bursting at the seams with donations. KELOLAND News took you inside Owens Outfitters' former location in Sioux Falls back in July. But now, this warehouse near Russell in Minnesota offers much more room to organize and display medical equipment.
And so now being here, we can spread it out a little bit more.
Owens Outfitters opened in this existing building on July 28th. The extra space improves the experience for people browsing for items.
You're able to just walk up to the shelf and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize you had all this stuff. And like, we did, but it was sort of piled together, or it was in here and tucked away in a conference room.
This building also offers a spacious welcome area.
We've got offices for, in the future, we're going to have community health workers and a conference room where we'll be able to host classes for the community.
I feel like when people come in here, They're just blown away by how much space we have. It's looking a lot cleaner. It's far less cluttered. And we're just really proud of the transformation that's happened.
Owens Outfitters launched after the death of the Turner's son, who benefited from a similar program.
We really believe what we're providing is valuable for folks who are struggling either to find the equipment that they need or they can't afford the equipment they need.
And now there's more space to help people.
And now Kelly Volk joins us. Kelly, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit, for people who don't know, what is Owens Outfitters?
So it's described as a medical equipment lending library. So Owens Outfitters accepts donations such as wheelchairs, walkers, unused bandages, stuff like that. And then anyone who needs that stuff can come in and get it for free. If you get something like a wheelchair or crutches, the idea is that you would return it when you don't need it anymore. But of course, things like diabetic supplies, obviously they don't want that back. But it lends equipment out to people for free.
Wow, that's amazing that it's free. And obviously when people are having, those medical issues in their family, that takes a huge toll on them. So it's really nice to have just that little help. Obviously, they said that it's 10 times bigger now than their previous location. Did they say why they needed to change locations or if they were running into any issues with their smaller space?
Well, medical equipment is very big, as you can imagine. A hospital bed takes up a lot of room. And as more and more people find out about Owens Outfitters, they're getting so many more donations, not just from individual people, but maybe a nursing home has some stuff to get rid of or a big medical clinic, and they have a lot of stuff to drop off at once. And so this big warehouse with these huge doors just makes it so much easier to load stuff in and store it. And then it's easier for the people who are browsing too. Before, everything was pretty just much stacked up on top of each other, and it was kind of hard to find what you were looking for.
Sure.
Now it's a lot easier just to scope out the supply and find something you need.
Yeah, and as far as, what their new location looks like, obviously you were there. Tell us a little bit about what it looks like on the inside. And obviously, I don't know if you were at the smaller location, but what is the new location like?
Yeah, I've been to both. I've followed this story as they transition into this bigger space. The new location, it is an existing building that was there. It's a warehouse-style building, but they put a fresh coat of paint on the entrance. It's a huge welcome desk. They have some of their Owens Outfitters merchandise. They've really brightened up the area. Offices, a conference room, those are all things that they did not have before. And then the warehouse part, again, is just so much bigger than what they used to have. There's a lot of shelving, not as cluttered and overwhelming as it was in the past.
Yeah, and you sort of mentioned the clutter. And how do you think that this new space is going to better help them serve people and show people about the resources that they have for them?
Well, I think for people who are browsing, it gives them a better idea of what's all available. Mike Turner told me now when people are coming in, they're coming for the thing that they need, but then they see other supplies and they're like, oh, I need that and I need that. And
Sure.
I didn't realize you had all of this stuff. And, the reason people may not have realized is because it was so compact previously.
Amazing. Well, Kelly, is there anything else that you think viewers should know about your story?
Well, a lot of volunteers helped them get to this point, but they still need more volunteers with tasks like finishing up the painting or maybe assembling some furniture. So if you have a little extra time on your hands and you want to help out, you can get a hold of Owens Outfitters and pitch in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us, Kelly.
Thank you.
Coming up, after 4 newspapers shut down in South Dakota last week, we talk with one newspaper that says they aren't going anywhere. That's ahead on Inside the Newsroom. Welcome back to Inside the Newsroom. With the unexpected closure of 4 local newspapers in South Dakota, one independent paper is assuring its readers it'll be around for a long time. 8 years ago, Jill Meyer started the Brandon Valley Journal as an independent community newspaper. She said she feels for the people in Brookings, Huron, Flandreau, and Redfield who just lost their newspaper.
I think every community deserves a local newspaper. Again, it's just important we need to be informed. We need to know what's going on.
Now joining us is Gracie Terrell. Gracie, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yes, hello.
Hi. So tell me a little bit about the Brandon Valley Journal and sort of how it got started.
Yeah, so Jill Meyer, she's been in Brandon for a really long time. She worked for a while with the Brandon Challenger for about 13 years, which was the newspaper there. They were owned by a company called Gannett, which also owned the Argus Leader here in Sioux Falls. And about 8-ish years ago, 2016, 2017 time, she, and along with about 40 other employees from the Challenger and the Argus, were laid off and let go. So she was without a job there in Brandon, and then decided to start up the Brandon Valley Journal, a community-led independent newspaper, to kind of supplement any of that news. She knew that with the reduced staff of the Challenger, that there was going to be some gaps there for, the news that they had there in Brandon. So she kind of started that up, and it's been going into its 9th year here this week.
Wow, this week. It's like an anniversary. I love it. So obviously we're talking about, 4 newspapers just closed, which led a lot of communities to lose that immediate in their city, this is what's happening. How did the Brandon Valley Journal end up sort of saving that after, it closed in their town?
Yeah. So the timeline with when the Brandon Valley Journal started and when the Challenger closed was about a 2-year overlap. So Jill, when she was laid off and started up the Journal, that was in about August 2017. And she kind of knew that underneath a corporation there, they weren't doing too well in terms of, the outlook of news. So she started that paper up, and then 2 years later is when the Challenger, when that media company, Gannett, finally closed the doors of the Challenger. So if she hadn't opened that up, there would be this same situation kind of that the Brookings community here on Flandreau, Redfield is in right now, where they are without a news source for those big communities.
Sure. I remember when the radio layoffs took place a little over a year or so ago. And, a lot of people were asking, what is the future of that radio? And I ended up talking to somebody who has been in the radio for decades and decades. And they said that really where they believe the future, at least for radio, was those independently owned instead of owned by the larger company. So is that sort of what they're seeing with newspaper, or what are they sort of leaning towards as far as independently owned versus owned by a larger company? Because I'm sure there's perks and downfalls to both.
Sure, yeah. So it wasn't necessarily a, this is where the future is going in terms of newspapers with independently owned, but for this and for this community, that was what, it is beneficial for them. So the independently owned paper, that's usually owned by somebody, probably the publisher, the editor. In this case, it was Jill. So she's the person that, is running it, has the final say on all of the production. I believe there was some fundraising efforts in the community to kind of try and get that started, and there's the ad revenue and those legals that kind of pay for that. But there's also, larger media companies like Gannett that owns the Argus Leader and that owned the Challenger, and there was also the News Media Corporation that owned the 4 papers that just shut down. And that national media company, they closed their doors for these newspapers here in South Dakota and many in other states. So they're kind of at the helm of some national decisions there. So the being able to be an independent paper, they don't have those worries. And I know Jill, she said that when people were coming in to renew their subscription, they had asked about that. Are you under the same company as the Register in Brookings or as the Plainsman in Huron? Because they don't want their news that they subscribe to for the year to just kind of go away with no warning to those people. So that's kind of the benefits that the community and that Jill was referring to in terms of being an independent newspaper.
Yeah, 100%. I can't imagine just losing something that was always reliable, it was always there, and then one day just not having it out of the blue. What does the community of Brandon, how do they perceive and do they care about their local newspaper?
Yeah. So since this week it was their anniversary, it's the time that everyone is coming into the newsroom, the office there to renew their subscription. So when I was there chatting with Jill, a lot of people kind of came through and were renewing their subscription. So I chatted with some of them, and they said that it was comforting to know that that their news organization, their media or their newspaper isn't going to go away for under the same circumstances as the ones in Brookings and in Huron and the other places that it is run by Jill herself, and it's kind of up to her whether or not it stays around for a while. And she said that she's going to go into her retirement doing this for quite a while there in Brookings. So yeah, they really value that. And 8 years ago when it was starting up, there was community support there as well because they recognized and knew that they needed news in Brandon.
Amazing, Gracie. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add or want viewers to know about your story yesterday?
I think one of the interesting stats that I was able to pull from this is that of those 4 communities, Brookings, Huron, Redfield, and Flandreau, those together make up about 47,000 people without a local news source to cover their city council meetings and talk to their mayor and their sheriff about small things that their community is worried about. So that's a good chunk of people that is now without that local news.
Amazing, Gracie. Well, thank you so much for being with us. That is all our time for now. Thanks for watching Inside the Newsroom. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 1 p.m.